My name is Natalie Moore, 35 years old. If someone had asked me years ago, do you believe you'll one day find yourself inside a corporate drama where you're both the actor and the director? My answer now would be short: I do. And that story began on a Monday afternoon, the moment I closed my office door and finished the last sip of lukewarm coffee. Stonebridge Dynamics. Sounds respectable, doesn't it? It's where I poured the best years of my life trying to prove I belonged. This wasn't some app startup or social media playground. We built defense technology, code that could decide between precision and disaster. Every line, every contract carried a weight you could feel in your bones. Before all this, I was a military officer. I learned how to stay calm under pressure, how to stand in the line of fire without losing clarity. That instinct didn't vanish when I entered the corporate world. It became my armor. Then one day, the rules changed. She arrived, Ava Sinclair, carrying every advantage her last name could buy, daughter of Grant Sinclair, our CEO, a former officer turned executive legend. Ava had the pedigree, the MBA from a top school, and just weeks earlier, she'd been handed the title Vice President of Strategic Initiatives, a role that gave her full access to the very project I had built from the ground up. I still remember her first entrance, like an actress stepping onto a stage. Perfect blazer, bright eyes, confident stance. During her introductory meeting, she said, "We can restructure the workflow, reduce costs by 15%, increase efficiency by 20%. I listened quietly, nodding just enough to be polite. Inside, I thought, nice words, but words don't hold under pressure. She looked like someone fresh from business school, full of theory, untested by storms. I didn't panic. I watched her with the same calm I'd learned from years of command drills, the calm of someone who knows how to keep a ship steady in rough water. I'd endured tougher tests, sleepless nights, endless field exercises, survival under pressure. So Ava's confidence barely scratched the surface. Grant Sinclair, the CEO, was a man I respected but never underestimated. He entered rooms the way generals enter war zones, door pushed open, footsteps sharp, presence undeniable. He demanded excellence and fear, and Ava, the privileged heir, had just been given the master key to a world the rest of us had bled years to enter. One late afternoon, surrounded by stacks of documents and overlapping deadlines, I opened my laptop. My coffee was cold, trembling slightly as I set it beside the keyboard. Then an email. Unexpected. Subject: Original proposal. Please review. Sender: Ava. Inside was a document identical to my draft proposal, except for a few subtle edits I had never made. My hand froze on the mouse. I opened the file, line by line. The data looked cleaner, the phrasing smoother, the numbers slightly inflated, enough to impress an audience, but misaligned with the real logic behind my plan. I shut the screen, reopened it, again and again. The soft hum of the cooling fan sounded like a long sigh echoing through the quiet office. I glanced out the window. The late sunlight cast long lines across the steel beams and the trees below. A thought pressed against my mind. Did she access my account? Did she see what she shouldn't have? Reporting her would be simple but dangerous. Without proof, it would look like envy. A jealous subordinate is trying to smear the boss's daughter. Staying silent would mean watching her steal more and saying nothing. Neither option worked. I needed a third move, quiet, deliberate, precise. The move of someone who plays long games. That night, I wrote one line to Jacob, my most trusted ally in IT. Jacob, need to meet tonight. Personal matter. His reply came fast. Server room, 8 p.m. When darkness fell, the building hushed. The lights dimmed floor by floor. The servers whispered, steady and rhythmic. I sat before the monitor, watching the LEDs blink like tiny heartbeats, listening to the hum of the drives. And in that moment, I knew tonight was only the beginning. From now on, every move she made, I'd already see coming, and I wouldn't let anyone decide how I'd be treated again. When the final screen faded to black, I whispered to myself, "Tomorrow's going to be interesting." You're probably thinking right now, this sounds familiar. Maybe you've met your own Ava, someone who walks in, untested, unproven, yet somehow gets everything you had to earn inch by inch. So tell me, where are you listening from? Are you stuck in traffic right now, watching the city crawl by? Or maybe you've just ended a long day, cup of tea in hand, letting yourself unwind with a story that feels a little too real. Wherever you are, New York's rush, Austin's sunlight, or some quiet corner of Idaho, I'm glad you're here. Because this story isn't just mine, it's ours. The story of everyone who's ever had to stay calm through injustice and learn to fight back not with anger, but with intellect. I arrived at the office earlier than usual the next morning. The building was still quiet, no chatter, no footsteps rushing down the hall, only the faint hum of the air vents and the lingering smell of yesterday's coffee. That hour always gave me a sense of control, like I could move one step ahead of the day before it even began. I powered on my computer, opened my email, and logged into the system. I wasn't sure if it was instinct, habit, or the kind of vigilance that years in uniform had drilled into me, but I knew something was off, and I was right. In my inbox sat a new message from Ava. Subject: minor update to the proposal. The body read, Natalie, I adjusted a few sections in the plan this morning, sending it for your review when you have time. A. To anyone else, this might look perfectly normal, a colleague sharing a document for feedback. But I had never sent Ava the original file, so where did she get it to adjust? I opened the attachment. It was the same proposal I had spent nearly 3 weeks building with the engineering team, but Ava's version had been polished. Charts redesigned, financial forecasts looking brighter, the technical section streamlined to appear more efficient. At first glance, it was impressive, the kind of presentation you'd want to show in a boardroom. But I knew every number, every line, and I recognized it instantly. This wasn't her work, it was mine, stolen, edited, and dressed up with a thin coat of her so-called personal touch. So the question was, how did she get it? I quietly opened the internal access tracker, something only people like me and Jacob, the head of cybersecurity, could view in detail. I scanned the recent login activity under my credentials, and there it was. A login at 10:23 p.m., the night before, outside office hours, from an unfamiliar device. Not my workstation, not my phone, not my home VPN. The location, the executive floor, a place Ava had access to. I took screenshots, saved the logs, and began connecting the dots in my head. I didn't have official proof yet, but the pattern was too precise to ignore. To be sure, I called Jacob and asked him to pull the hallway camera footage from the executive floor around 10 p.m. An hour later, he sent me the clip, a woman's silhouette entering the executive offices, laptop in hand. No clear face, but her leather bag, embossed with Ava's monogram, was unmistakable. The timestamp, 10:22 p.m. Exactly 1 minute before my account was accessed. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was confirmation. But I didn't act. Not yet. I needed to know what she planned to do with what she took. Was she going to use it in the upcoming presentation, try to claim the credit, or quietly position herself as the new project lead? That afternoon, during a meeting with the technical and finance teams, Ava sat beside me and presented a risk optimization proposal. She spoke clearly, confidently, showing charts that looked so familiar, I almost laughed. On the surface, it was collaboration. But I knew this was my work, just repackaged. I didn't react. I nodded, calm as ever. The calmer I stayed, the less she suspected. When the meeting ended, I turned to the group. Tomorrow, I said, I'll add a few core technical documents. If anyone has time, stop by my office to cross-check them. Simple words, but it was a probe. I wanted to see if Ava would dare to come. If she did, I'd finally see her face when she realized she was walking straight into the real version. That evening, Jacob and I sat again in the server room. He showed me the logs, comparing time, location, and device. Everything matched Ava perfectly. There was no doubt left. The only question now was what I was going to do about it. I could report it immediately, email the CEO, demand an internal investigation, but I'd learned something in the military. Sometimes the best revenge is to let someone walk into their own trap. Quietly. No shouting, no anger, just a plan and patience. That night, I stood by the office window. The lights from the upper floors reflected off the glass, each one a reminder of how many people like me had built the foundations only to be pushed aside. And then I thought of you, the one listening to me now. Where are you right now? On your drive home? Sitting alone in your office? Or maybe just unwinding with a story that feels a little too real? Wherever you are, if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever watched someone take credit for your work, I want you to know one thing. You're not alone, and you always have the right to rewrite the ending of your own story. I was almost the last one to leave the office that night. The hallway slowly grew silent, the lights dimmed into power-saving mode, and my shadow stretched long across the wall as if someone were walking just behind me. I didn't go home to rest. I needed a quieter time to piece together everything that had fallen into place during the day. In front of me were two things. The USB drive Jacob had prepared with access logs and surveillance footage from the internal system, and the updated document Ava had emailed with a casual subject line, as if it were something she had thrown together over afternoon tea. I opened my personal laptop not to work, but to reconstruct the timeline. What I was after wasn't just evidence, but motive. What was Ava really trying to do? She was new. She had academic credentials, a polished image, and a direct line to the CEO. But none of that was enough to lead an $80 million defense project, unless she had something to prove her personal worth. And then it clicked. She didn't just want to ride on her father's name. She wanted an independent win, or at least the appearance of one. And the fastest way to get that was to borrow someone else's work and stamp it with her own signature. The more I thought about it, the more absurd it became. Not because she was clever, but because she was overconfident that no one would notice. Ava was like someone opening your safe and leaving a note behind saying, "Just borrowing." The next morning, I decided not to go straight to my office. I stopped by the engineering floor where Jacob was making coffee and tuning the security servers. He looked at me and understood immediately. Today wasn't a normal day. "Can we dig deeper?" I asked. "See exactly which device is using my credentials and what it's been accessing and when." Jacob nodded and started typing rapidly. He pulled up a new log dashboard filled with details: device, operating system, browser, session time, files opened, and data downloaded. We found a device with the code EX204B, never registered in the company's asset system. It had logged in under my name 3 times in the past week, always after hours, always into the same folder: Apex/Tactical/Proposal NM-6, V6, the version I had never released. Jacob looked at me, his eyes steady. "This device is a MacBook Air, Ventura OS, internal access protocol. It can only be coming from the executive floor." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. "There's more," he added quietly. "This device also tried to access one of your personal folders, review notes, House Personnel 2021. That's not project related." I looked up. That was the folder where I kept performance notes, internal assessments, and personal career plans. It wasn't dangerous, but it was private. No one but me and the head of HR had any reason to read it. Ava didn't just want to steal credit. She was looking for leverage, searching for weak spots, setting up a preemptive strike, preparing bait to undermine me if I reacted too strongly. I looked at Jacob, my voice lower now. "I need you to keep all this data safe. No one but you and me can know. And I need a parallel test environment where I can build a set of decoy documents so if she comes back, she only sees what I want her to see." Jacob hesitated. "You're setting a trap?" "No," I smiled. "I'm giving her a chance to prove herself or to destroy herself." We sat there for the next 2 hours planning a honeypot, a mirrored version of the project files seeded with subtle but devastating errors. Every number, every chart, every line crafted to look authentic but collapse on closer inspection. The goal wasn't to crush Ava, but to see if I gave her access to what she thought was gold. Would she be sharp enough to realize it was only gilded? Before leaving the server room, I turned back to Jacob and spoke quietly. "We're not fighting a newcomer. We're defending a system of values where real work deserves real credit. And as I walked back to my office, I knew the story wasn't over. But from now on, the game would be mine. After leaving the server room the night before, I returned to my desk, the warm yellow lamplight falling over the papers spread out like a battlefield. In my head, the question kept circling. If I report this now, she can deny it. If I stay silent, I lose control. Which choice is wise? I knew one thing for sure. I did not want an open internal war. I did not intend to shout or create a scandal. I wanted her to reveal herself, to show her hand, and to let others see it. That is a high-end form of revenge, no dirty hands required, just letting the truth speak. The next morning, I went to the office but did not go straight to the conference room or the main workspace. Instead, I stopped by the small IT room where Jacob had prepared a separate testing station, not connected to the main network, so it would not be noticed. He had installed hidden monitoring software, backup logs, and the tools to trigger a fake data environment when needed. I pulled a dedicated hard drive from my desk drawer, the one that held the carefully crafted decoy documents, and plugged it into the station. Each file was named and organized to mirror the real data structure: Apex Tech Specs V7 Final, Financials Q3 Adjusted, Timeline Integration V2, Risks, and Mitigations. Every file contained tiny planted flaws, easy to miss on a quick read, but obvious to anyone who inspected the details. I told Jacob, when she accesses using my credentials from an unknown device, redirect her session to this drive. She will treat everything as genuine, but it will be a trap. Jacob nodded in silence, determination flashing in his eyes. He wrote the script. The hidden software would automatically detect unusual access from unknown devices. The system would split the stream between real data and decoy data. Even if Ava opened and downloaded files, the logs would capture timestamps, device identifiers, and every action, while feeding her the fake versions. If she dug deep, we would have irrefutable proof. The morning passed in blue monitor light and the rhythm of typing. I walked past Ava's office in the hall and caught her glance. She smiled, an easy, overly confident smile, and said softly, "Natalie, I just sent a small update. Please take a look." I smiled back. "Thank you. I will review it carefully." My voice was neutral, no sign of tension, but inside, my nerves were taut, primed for the next act. At noon in the engineering group, Ava continued to talk about AI simulation efficiency, proposing new assumptions, and asking the development team, "I want to test version 2 tonight to get an early read. Can you do it?" Some were surprised, some hesitant, but she used a soft tone as if she only wanted to collaborate. Everyone knew she was running the play. I stayed quiet and watched. I overheard a colleague whisper to another, "She is trying to force a tight deadline. Looks like she wants to push the team into a trap." My heart beat a little faster. The feeling was confirmed. In the afternoon, I saw Ava stay after hours and open her laptop. She launched the file Apex Tech Specs Shui 7 Final, the exact decoy I had placed. I stood near the IT room at the edge of the corridor, listening to the quiet clicks as she scrolled through slides. The door labeled Server Control, Restricted Access made me smile. She had walked right where I wanted her to go. Jacob texted, "Fake data stream activated. She is viewing now." I did not answer. I stood still outside, feeling the breeze through the glass, hearing the hard drive spin, my mind empty in the way it is when you know the ending of a song. When she finished and left, Jacob sent me the activity log, times of file opens, the sections she viewed most, and the downloads. She had downloaded the fake file believing it was real. We had everything we needed, but we still made no accusation. She did not know she had been playing with a copy. That night, as the office emptied, I sat again in front of the screen. I opened the safeguarded original, checked every entry, and made sure it was ready for the decisive moment. I told myself I will not let her bring me down by stealing documents without leaving a trace. If she goes too far, she will expose her own mistake. When the last lights went out, I rested my head on the desk and thought about tomorrow. I knew the next scene would be a trial by fire, where she would either present the decoy as truth or reveal her deception. Tomorrow will be entertaining, in the way only someone who controls the board understands. The morning began with soft sunlight sliding through the executive glass at Stonebridge Dynamics. I walked into the office, keeping my usual calm, but in my head, I had already drafted responses for every possible scenario, because this time I knew Ava would not sit still. In the early executive meeting, Ava sat across from me. She handed the CEO and senior members a project status summary along with the upgrades she had hinted at in her email the night before. She spoke with confidence. I reviewed the progress and the risk model and proposed optimizations to ensure we meet deadlines without sacrificing quality. A few faces in the room showed a visible impression, especially the business directors who do not dig into technical details. She appeared to have an early win, but I refused to be taken by the glossy surface because I knew there was a fragile trap inside. The executive team began probing into finance and technical rollout. Ava answered smoothly, but when asked about specific risk assumptions or how the system would behave under peak load, she flickered for a moment. She tried to deflect. We have a test model and load checks in place. I watched patiently and prepared how to step in if she slipped. One of the technical directors suggested, Ms. Ava, could Natalie present the original technical files for comparison with this proposal? All eyes turned to me. I stood and said calmly, Of course. I prepared the original documents and will send the full version after the meeting so everyone can compare in detail. No forced confrontation, just a professional offer. With that, I nudged the next phase of my plan into motion. Before the break, Ava smiled at me, but I felt something in her eyes, a trace of discomfort, a flicker of caution. She knew something was off. After the meeting, I hurried with Jacob to the server room. He handed me more detailed access data. Ava had tried to open risks and mitigations, the section where I had deliberately planted a small technical flaw, and she had opened Timeline Integration V2 multiple times. That showed she was digging into details, trying to see if anything would break. Access to the risk section is 3 times normal, Jacob said softly. And the Plan B file she opened twice in a row, she's clearly probing for failure points. I nodded and told Jacob, Good. Keep monitoring, lock the logs, and if she downloads anything, capture the timestamps so we have clear proof. The afternoon meetings are split into smaller groups by topic: engineering, finance, and risk management. Ava intended to lead the risk segment and said, I believe the current model does not handle peak load properly. I propose additional technical fail-safes. A few engineers balked because they knew the system was reasonably optimized. I quietly opened my original file on my laptop and mentally compared it. The planted flaw was working as intended. The redundancy assumption in the decoy would show a hidden risk of overload with no timely mitigation. If Ava relied on the fake file and presented it, that part would be exposed as soon as someone drilled down. The session ended with an agreement that Ava would finalize the risk section tonight and send it to the execs before tomorrow's meeting. She packed up and left. I rose and said smoothly, Thanks, Ava. I'll help you review the risk section if you want to compare with the original version. Polite, collaborative words, but a hook in my script. Later in the afternoon, Ava did not retreat to a private office. She sat by the window, staring at the street, tapping her phone a few times, perhaps checking reactions or rereading her draft. I let her think. No need to press with stares or words. The trap was set. If she chose to step in, she would. Before I left, I stopped by IT and told Jacob, Tomorrow will be the small explosion. Prepare the hallway camera footage, especially where Ava walks, and keep the device logs ready. He nodded, his expression tightened. The door closed behind me, and the corridor fell silent except for the flicker of lights. Inside, I felt something settle, like a stone set precisely into place, not heavy, but immovable. I knew the next day would be very lively. The morning began with sunlight from Austin stretching across the executive glass at Stonebridge, leaving blurred streaks on the hallway floor. I walked into the office in a simple suit, calm as always, but every sense was sharp, like someone entering an underground arena. When I reached my desk, there were messages from Jacob. Log from last night looks stable. Ava viewed the risk section the most. Device EX204B is still active, no logins from elsewhere. Hallway cameras show her near the server room multiple times yesterday. I read the report in silence. The details fitted the scenario I had been preparing for. The morning meeting opened with engineering, finance, and risk analysis. Ava was assigned to lead the system risk session. She stood before the large screen, displayed charts, and spoke smoothly and confidently. When the system runs under heavy load without additional technical failover, we risk overload. I propose adding a secondary buffering module and a load balancing tier and keeping a 10% financial reserve for contingencies. It sounded reasonable. Some engineers nodded, and a few finance members leaned in and took notes. But the technical buffer she used in her presentation was exactly where I had planted a subtle flaw in the decoy file. Anyone who dug deeper would find the inconsistency. Claire, the lead engineer, frowned and asked, "In your model, if the secondary buffer also fills, how do we ensure the system fails safely? Is there a rollback path if thresholds are exceeded?" Ava hesitated, glanced at me, and then replied, "We can trigger another fallback module, but costs will rise considerably. I can include the rollback details in tonight's update." Her answer did not dispel doubts. Little murmurs went around the room. Who will pay for the rollback? Is it clearly defined? I heard each remark. At lunch, while others went out, I stayed and called Jacob over. I opened the decoy file Ava had accessed overnight. In the technical section, the secondary buffer module looked adequate at the surface level, but in the rollback path, I had deliberately set the financial reserve lower than required. Anyone presenting from the fake file without cross-checking the original would be exposed when questioned in depth. In the risk section, I also made an assumption that if the system faced a simultaneous coordinated attack, an element not publicly mentioned, the failover module would be pushed to its limit. If Ava presented the decoy and omitted that implicit assumption, the engineering team would call it out. I told Jacob, watch where she accesses repeatedly, especially buffer module and failover path. If she downloads or opens them multiple times, capture timestamps and device IDs. That will prove she used the decoy. He nodded, the strain visible on his face, as if he too felt we were in a battle. In the afternoon, Ava worked alone in her office. I watched her open failover path, the decoy, and tweak a few parameters. Unaware, her edits in the fake dataset would progressively seal the buffer's margins, so that engineers inspecting closely would spot contradictions. I called Jacob, screenshot her editing the fake file. Send me the logs. A few minutes later, he sent images, Ava editing failover path config v2, adjusting reserve figures. She was changing the decoy and believing it to be real. During the late meeting, Ava presented revised slides showing adjusted technical and financial reserves. Some members responded with admiration, but when Josh from engineering asked for deeper data comparison, "Can you show the comparison between the current version and the backup module? I want to check the pressure at 120%. Ava fumbled through her slides, looking for the detail, but could not find it. She said, "I don't have all the files with me. I will send the details before the main meeting." Not good enough. People exchanged looks, and the mood dipped. I stepped forward and said, "If you like, I can send the comparison between the current draft and my full technical version for the team to evaluate. Anyone who wants the full details can access them." Ava smiled, lips curved, but her eyes betrayed disarray. She had hoped I would decline so she could hide errors, but I refused to hand her that cover. The meeting closed without a dramatic blow, but a heavy, searching silence lingered among the members. Ava left with her head slightly bowed, the swagger gone. That night, I checked logs again. Ava opened failover path 7 times, buffer module config 5 times, and downloaded a fake buffer soft integration PDF. The evidence was complete. I smiled softly. She had walked into the trap without realizing she was playing someone else's game. Before leaving, I wrote a short note more like a warning than a threat. Tomorrow everything will be as clear as daylight. If you want to wield power, use it to show competence, not to steal. I knew the true confrontation was coming. The main act was waiting ahead. The next morning, the air inside Stonebridge Dynamics felt charged, like the hush before a decisive match. The hallways were quieter than usual, footsteps slower, glances drifting toward the main conference room, the place where everything would unfold. I entered early. The room was wide and cold, the long table covered in white, a massive LED screen glowing faintly. I set up my laptop in the corner, opening the verified original I had finalized the night before, ready to project it if needed. Outside, the tech team was running last checks on the network, projector, and audio. Every detail was perfect. Then came the attendees: CEO Grant Sinclair, senior directors, and the Defense Agency's review team, our client. When Ava walked in, she radiated poise. Her steps were light, her gaze sweeping across the room as if she already owned the moment. She began her presentation, opening a file titled Apex Revised Proposal v Final. The same file she had edited from the decoy the night before. Her opening was flawless. Clear, smooth, confident. She outlined goals, tactical vision, and projected benefits. The client representatives nodded, eyes flicking between her slides and the CEO. In the middle section, she detailed financial forecasts, ROI projections, operational costs, risk mitigation plans, all polished and well rehearsed. We expect an ROI of 18% in the first year, rising to 32% by year 3. Automation will offset operational costs within 24 months. In case of overload, the secondary redundancy module will activate to stabilize the main server. When she reached the failover plan, the one I'd laced with a flaw, her tone stayed steady. In case of irregularities, we can redirect data to the backup zone, reboot secondary nodes, and restore synchronization. She said it like someone who believed she had every answer. Her eyes shone with triumph. To me, it was the glint of someone walking on glass, unaware of the crack beneath. When she finished, the lights dimmed slightly. A hush filled the room. The CEO nodded. A few directors offered polite praise. The client smiled. Ava bowed lightly, then turned toward me. Natalie, thank you for reviewing the draft before today's session. If you'd like to add any technical insights, I'd be happy to compare them live. A move both cooperative and challenging. Every head turned toward me. I smiled. Thank you, Ava. Before we proceed to Q&A, I'd like to show a quick comparison between my verified technical version and the one just presented, so the team can better visualize the differences. I tapped a key. The screen switched to my original. A ripple went through the room. The figures didn't match. Small discrepancies, but clear. On the diagram, additional failover components appeared, the ones missing from Ava's model. The client representatives exchanged glances. The CFO spoke first. Why are these two versions different? Ava, could you explain why certain redundancy parameters from the original design aren't in your presentation? Ava stiffened. Her eyes darted toward the screen, then back to me. She forced a smile. Those adjustments were made for financial alignment and performance optimization. I can share the detailed update later. Not enough. Josh, the head of engineering, leaned forward. Natalie, could you walk us through the original technical structure of that redundancy module so we can compare it on record? I nodded. Of course. I connected my system to the screen. Code filled the display. Optimized threads, backup routing paths, load balancing sequences, recovery logic. Every parameter aligned perfectly with compliance requirements. The silence deepened. It didn't take a specialist to see it. Ava's version was sleek, market-ready, but stripped of the safeguards that made it viable in the first place. Her failover path was missing the very element that prevented catastrophic collapse. The defense engineers started asking specifics: temperature thresholds, latency caps, failure limits. Ava scrolled frantically, searching her folder. The decoy directory she'd copied from contained only placeholders. I'll send the technical appendix after this session, she said weakly. I didn't bring every data file today. Several clients frowned. CEO Sinclair's expression hardened. Ava's smile faded. She lowered her gaze. I closed my slides gently. I've brought the verified build and the full documentation. If anyone would like to review it line by line, I'll forward it right now. In engineering, when something's designed correctly, it doesn't need defense. It speaks for itself. The meeting ended heavily and quietly. Ava walked out first, head down, pace measured, confidence visibly fractured. CEO Sinclair looked at her, then at me. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Ava. We'll need to examine both versions carefully before deciding. When the room emptied, I packed my laptop, glanced once more at the technical report still glowing on the screen, and exhaled. The fight wasn't over, not yet. But today I had turned the trap into light, and light, once shown, couldn't be taken back. That night, after the meeting, Stonebridge Dynamics was no longer glowing with the energy of the day. The hallways were silent, filled only with the low hum of the air conditioning and the dim light from the security rooms. Cameras watched quietly, recording every movement. I sat alone in my office, scrolling through the original technical file line by line, double-checking everything, ready to make adjustments if needed. But my mind was already on tomorrow, when everything would finally be exposed. I sent an email to the executive board titled Technical Comparison, Original Version versus Current Proposal, for tomorrow's discussion. The message was short, polite, restrained. Dear Executive Board, to ensure clarity and transparency, I'm attaching the original technical version I used during preparation. I'll be ready to explain details as needed. Best regards, Natalie. It looked like cooperation. In truth, it was a quiet strike disguised as compliance. The next morning, the atmosphere in the main conference room was tense, like a wire about to snap. The clients had arrived early. So had the CEO and the board. The projector was already set up, 2 documents side by side, Ava's presentation on one side, mine on the other. Ava walked in looking composed, confident, but there was a flicker of unease in her eyes. She knew what kind of morning this would be. She gave me a quick glance, almost a challenge. I met it with a calm, knowing smile. CEO Sinclair began. Today, we'll compare both versions of the project, Ava's proposal and the original design prepared by Natalie. I don't want opinions. I want data, line by line, number by number. We'll decide which version is more reliable. The screen is split in half. Ava's slides on the left, mine on the right. Everyone leaned forward, eyes sharp. Ava took the microphone first, starting her defense. I stayed quiet. Every detail in my head was already in perfect order. She went through her opening, the benefits, the financial projections, the same confident rhythm she always used. But once the technical section began, the questions started cutting in. Sharp, specific, unavoidable. In Ava's version, the backup module only activates when the load exceeds 110%. What happens at 120? The original version has a fallback scenario. Some of Ava's contingency lines just say, to be provided later. The original lists full algorithms. Several parameters in Ava's file don't match the baseline assumptions in the signed contract. The original stays consistent with compliance boundaries. Ava began flipping through her slides, eyes darting. Natalie, she said, a little too quickly. Those are small details I didn't include in this presentation, but I can send them afterward. The clients didn't buy it. A senior engineer on their side stood up. We need the technical data now. When you show ROI numbers, we need to see the upper limit assumptions. Natalie's version provides those details. I rose from my seat, steady and deliberate. If it's all right, I can walk everyone through the technical details in the original file, each backup algorithm, each overload scenario, each critical assumption. We can compare them directly with Ava's version. I connected my laptop to the screen and opened the verified build. Every diagram, every algorithm in its place. At 120% load, I explained, the backup module triggers a hybrid dynamic static response, activates a secondary node, and rebalances the pressure. If that threshold is exceeded, the system shifts to a safe route. Everything documented, everything tested. Then I showed slide by slide where Ava's version had diverged. Her secondary buffer didn't adjust smoothly under variable stress. Her fallback route existed only in theory, no code. And most critically, she'd ignored the simultaneous attack scenario I had hard-coded into the simulation. If multiple nodes went down at once, her version would fail. The room shifted. Clients leaned toward me, pens moving fast. CEO. Sinclair's expression hardened. The attention had crossed the table. Ava wasn't being listened to anymore. The room now belonged to evidence. She opened her own folders, trying to locate the missing sections, but her mirrored directory didn't contain them. Or worse, it did, but with wrong assumptions that broke the model. When she murmured, "I'll send the full details later," Sinclair cut her off. "No later. We're here to verify everything now. If you can't defend it live, that's a problem." The clients nodded. More questions came, direct, merciless. What are your failure parameters for dual node crashes? What's the fallback timing if both nodes drop within 10 seconds? Ava hesitated, flipping through empty placeholders. "I apologize, that section wasn't included due to time limits," one client answered coldly. "Time limits don't excuse a lack of transparency. We're not buying a presentation. We're investing in reliability." That was the blow that finished it. Ava's version, glossy and decorative, was stripped bare. The original, precise, verifiable, uncompromising, stood on its own. CEO Sinclair rose, voice steady and final. "We'll review the original file in full. This project demands leadership rooted in detail, not appearance." Ava froze, staring at her slides like they had turned to dust. The clients turned to me instead, extending hands, nodding. Trust had shifted, quietly but irreversibly. When the meeting ended, I gathered my notes. The room was heavy with silence and clarity. Ava walked out first, her posture proud, but her mask cracked. Sinclair stayed behind. "Natalie, thank you. Today you helped us see the truth of this project. We'll evaluate both versions before deciding if Ava continues with it." I smiled lightly. "Thank you, sir. I've always believed the best work is the one that can stand in daylight." As the room emptied, I paused by the door. The projector still displayed my file, glowing faintly against the wall. I knew this wasn't the end of the war, but today I'd won one crucial battle, the kind that lets the truth breathe and leaves no doubt who was actually doing the work. That afternoon, after the storm of the strategy meeting, the hallways of the company felt quieter than usual. The soft amber light from the crystal fixtures reflected on the marble floor as employees walked by, the hum of the air system steady and low. The monitors in the conference room still displayed the original slides, like silent witnesses reminding everyone that today the truth had surfaced. I walked back to my office without rush or triumph, just calm, deliberate steps of someone who had simply done her job. In my mind, I was already mapping out what would follow. Ava would likely be stripped of her privileges, maybe suspended, maybe held accountable in front of the board. And I thought of my team, the people behind the screens who had worked beside me quietly, fearing the fallout if our plan was ever exposed. Half an hour later, CEO Grant Sinclair called an internal meeting. Ava, I, the senior directors, and the department heads were all invited. When everyone entered the room, the air carried that tense stillness that only comes after a reckoning. Eyes met across the table, some curious, some wary, all asking the same question. Now what? Who actually won? Grant started. "As you've all seen today, transparency and reliability are the backbone of Stonebridge Dynamics. The Apex project is a strategic defense contract. We can't afford presentations that look good on the surface but hide faults underneath. Starting today, the original version Natalie presented will be the official basis for all further reviews. Ava, I appreciate your effort, but you'll be placed in retraining before joining any future project. Your title remains, but from now on, you'll have to earn back your authority through proven performance." Ava stayed silent, her shoulders softening slightly. I looked at her, not with gloating satisfaction, but with quiet clarity. This is what happens when you underestimate someone who stands on competence. Grant turned to me. "Natalie, from today, you'll lead the Apex project directly with the defense partners. You'll report to me and have full technical authority. The contract will move forward based on your verified documentation." The room broke into light applause. I rose to speak. "Thank you, Mr. Sinclair, and thank you to the board for your trust. I believe the only way for collaboration to thrive is through transparency and accountability. I'll make sure every step honors both." Ava remained silent, but as the meeting ended, she approached me quietly. "Natalie," she said, If you're willing, I want to learn how you work. From the inside, not by stepping over people. I looked into her eyes and saw something unexpected. Shame mixed with respect. I smiled gently. The opportunity is always there, Ava. But it starts with honesty. She nodded and left. I knew her path ahead wouldn't be easy. People would watch her closely, judge her harshly. But I also knew she could rebuild, if she truly wanted to. That evening, as the office lights dimmed, I sat back at my desk. I opened the drawer and took out a stack of files, a hard drive containing the original logs, and archived footage from the security cameras, every piece of evidence preserved just in case. Then I opened the window. The Austin sky was clear, a few stars flickering faintly. I felt quiet, grounded, but never regretful. I remembered something a speaker once said at a leadership seminar. Respect isn't given, it's earned. After all the pressure, all the silent battles, I hadn't demanded recognition with words. I earned it with strategy, patience, and truth. I let the facts speak for themselves. So if you're listening now, this part is for you. You don't have to shout to prove your worth if your work is transparent. Sometimes the best way to silence the loud ones is to let them talk until the truth exposes them. When you build a system that filters lies for others, remember, you're playing with trust. Don't become a liar yourself. And if you've ever been doubted or dismissed, know this. People can see you too if you give them something real to see. This story ends here. But the next chapter, the one that belongs to you, depends on how you choose to tell it.